The server that stores all our happy memories in a folder labeled Family now also holds the 4K evidence of its demolition. 2 minutes and 14 seconds of pure, uncompressed betrayal. And the architect of that demolition, my neighbor, has no idea that I used to design controlled demolitions for a living. Not of buildings, of people. You see me, you probably think you know me. I am David, mid-40s. I wear comfortable New Balance sneakers and polo shirts I buy in 3-packs from Costco. I live in a beige 2-story house in Plano, Texas, where the biggest neighborhood drama is whose turn it is to pressure wash the sidewalk. My wife, Emily, used to tease me about my paranoia, and looking back, maybe she was right. I wasn't paranoid enough. People like them, people like my charming wife and the perfect family man next door, they make a critical mistake. They look at a guy like me, a quiet IT consultant who spends his weekends optimizing a home network, and they see a harmless nerd. They see a system that's easy to hack. They never, ever see the trap until the steel jaws have snapped shut around their ankles. You want to know how to tear a man's world down. It's not a chaotic explosion. It's a science. It is a series of precise, calculated pressures applied to structural weaknesses until the whole thing collapses under its own weight. And I, the quiet guy from the suburbs, was the best in the business. But that was a lifetime ago, or so I thought. 6 months ago, that man was buried deep. 6 months ago, I was just David, the husband, the IT geek, the future dog dad. My world was orderly, predictable, and safe. I had designed it that way. Our house was my sanctuary. We bought it 2 years prior, a standard-issue suburban box in a neighborhood where every lawn was a perfect green carpet, and every mailbox stood at military attention. It was the American dream, or at least the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex version of it. It was stable. It was quiet. To Emily, it was a little boring. To me, it was the perfect environment to deploy my masterpiece, the Ashford Residence Integrated Security and Automation System, or as Emily called it, the Fortress. I spent the first 3 months running what must have been miles of Cat E6 Ethernet cable through the attic and walls. I didn't trust Wi-Fi for critical infrastructure. Too susceptible to interference, too easy to jam. I installed power over Ethernet security cameras under every eave, each with a crystal clear 4K sensor and a microphone sensitive enough to pick up a whisper from the street. The smart locks on the doors had multi-factor authentication tied to our phones. The lights, the thermostat, the garage door, everything was routed through a local server I built myself, with a triple redundant backup. It was my hobby, my art. Emily watched me, a bemused smile on her face, as I calibrated the motion sensor zones on the back patio. "David," she said, leaning against the doorframe, a glass of Chardonnay in her hand. "We live in Plano, not Gotham. Who are you afraid of? Raccoons getting into the trash." I smiled back. "A system is only as strong as its weakest point, Em. I'm just eliminating weak points." "My nerdy protector," she laughed, coming over to kiss me. Her perfume, something light and floral, always made me feel grounded. It smelled like home, like safety. The truth is, I wasn't protecting us from burglars. I'd spent 15 years on Wall Street, not as a trader, but as a digital forensic analyst. The guy they called in when a high-flying executive was suspected of cooking the books. My job was to live in the ghost world of deleted files, encrypted servers, and secret data streams. I pieced together betrayals from fragments of code. I watched titans of industry crumble because of a single careless email. I'd seen the absolute worst of human nature, the casual greed and deception that hides behind expensive suits and confident smiles. I retired from that life because I was tired of swimming in filth. I came here to Plano for the clean, quiet, predictable beige. I built my fortress to keep that world out. Then we got Bailey. He was an 8-week-old golden retriever, a fluffy, chaotic bundle of joy that immediately turned our orderly house upside down. He chewed on the leg of a dining chair, had an accident on the Persian rug, and saw every throw pillow as a mortal enemy. He was perfect, and he became the justification for the final, fateful piece of my system. I need a way to keep an eye on him when we re-out, I told Emily, holding up a small white camera, a Wise Cam. Simple, consumer grade, but effective. Another camera. David, you already have 12. They all point outside, I explained patiently. This one is for inside, for Bailey. We can check in on him, make sure he's not tearing the place apart. She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. Okay, fine. But if I catch you using it to see if I am eating ice cream straight from the carton, we were going to have a problem. I set it on the mantelpiece in the living room. The wide-angle lens covered the entire space, the couch, the doorway to the kitchen, the hallway leading to the front door. It was the perfect vantage point. Most people would set it for event-based recording, to only capture clips when it detected motion. But I knew better. Event-based recording misses context. You miss the moments just before and just after. You get fragments, not the whole story. So I logged into the settings and subscribed to the premium service. I set the little camera to record continuously, 24/7, with all the footage uploaded directly to the cloud. A constant, impartial, high-definition stream of our life, all to watch a puppy. That night, Emily and I lay on the couch, Bailey asleep between us, and watched a live feed of our own living room on the TV. We laughed as we replayed a clip of Bailey skidding on the hardwood floor, trying to chase his own tail. Okay, Emily conceded, resting her head on my shoulder. I admit, it's kind of cute. I put my arm around her, breathing in the scent of her hair. Everything was in its place. My fortress was complete. My system was secure. I had built a perfect, transparent fortress around our perfect life. It never once occurred to me that the only real threat wasn't trying to get in. It was already inside, smiling right beside me on the couch. The trip to Austin was a standard 2-day affair. I consulted with a small tech firm on their data security protocols, ate some overpriced barbecue, and slept in a sterile Marriott hotel room. The entire time, a small part of my brain was already home, picturing Emily and Bailey, the quiet order of my fortress. When I finally pulled into the driveway on Wednesday evening, a sense of profound relief washed over me. This was my life. The noise of the outside world, the data breaches, the corporate espionage, the lies, it all stopped at my front door. Emily was out at a book club meeting, leaving me and Bailey to our own devices. The puppy greeted me with the kind of unrestrained joy that makes you believe the world is a fundamentally good place. After taking him out, I settled into my office chair, the familiar leather sighing under my weight. I felt an urge to do something nice for Emily, a small surprise. That's when the idea struck me, a Bailey video, a short, funny montage of his puppy antics from the last couple of days. I could set it to some upbeat music, have it playing on the TV when she got home. A simple, loving gesture. I pulled up the web interface for the camera cloud storage. The timeline was a digital river, a clean blue line representing the last week of continuous recording. I could drag the playhead anywhere and instantly be transported. I started scrubbing through the footage, looking for gold. There, Bailey, wrestling with a throw pillow twice his size. I chuckled, bookmarking the timestamp, and there he was again, chasing a sunbeam across the hardwood floor, his paws scrabbling for purchase. Another bookmark. I found a dozen little moments, each one a perfect, innocent snapshot of our life. As I dragged the timeline back, my finger slipped on the mouse wheel, sending the playhead spinning backward past Tuesday afternoon. I was about to scroll forward again when a thumbnail caught my eye. It was from around 3 p.m. on Tuesday, the day I was away. The living room was empty except for Bailey, who was sleeping on the couch. I almost moved on, but a professional habit, a ghost of my former life, made me pause. Always check the empty spaces. That is where things hide. I clicked play. The image was flawless. I de-installed the camera myself, ensuring the lighting was optimal, the focus tack sharp. 4K resolution, 30 frames per second, better than real life. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Bailey was twitching in his sleep, his little paws paddling, probably dreaming of chasing squirrels. For a minute, that's all it was. Quiet, peaceful. Then I heard the sound of the front door unlocking, not with a key, but with the electronic chime of the keypad. I knew that sound. It was the code ID set for Emily. She walked into the frame, setting her purse down on the entryway table. She was wearing the blue dress I loved, the one she wore on our anniversary. She checked her phone, a small, anxious smile playing on her lips. She looked beautiful, and she looked guilty. The front door, still slightly ajar, swung open, and Steve walked in. Steve from next door. Steve, the Little League coach, the successful realtor with the perfect family and the gleaming white smile. He didn't knock. He just entered, like he belonged there, like he'd done it 100 times before. I watched, frozen, as Emily's anxious smile blossomed into one of genuine, unrestrained delight. She went to him, and he wrapped his arms around her, lifting her slightly off the ground. He didn't just kiss her. He kissed her like he owned the space she occupied. The camera, his microphone, the one I had boasted was sensitive enough to hear a pin drop, picked up everything. The sound of their lips, the rustle of his polo shirt against her dress, and their whispers. "God, I missed you," he murmured into her hair. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered back, though she made no move to pull away. David could have come home early. "He won," Steve said, his voice a low, confident rumble. "He called from the conference. He's stuck there until tomorrow. Donut worry about David. Donut worry about David." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. In that single sentence, I was dismissed, erased from my own home, from my own life. I was just an obstacle, a logistical problem to be managed. Something inside me broke, or maybe it didn't break. Maybe it was forged. The hot, blinding rage that should have come was instantly quenched by a flood of ice-cold clarity. The shock, the pain, the betrayal, it was all there, but it was being processed through a different filter. The part of me I had tried to bury under layers of suburban beige clawed its way to the surface. The husband in me died in that moment. What was left was the analyst. I kept watching. I had to. I needed all the data. They moved to the couch, pushing the sleeping puppy aside. I watched for another 12 minutes as they touched, kissed, and spoke in low tones about their plans, their frustrations, their shared secret. He complimented the new bracelet on her wrist. The one she'd told me was a bonus from her PR firm for landing a big client. The analyst in my head was taking notes. Duration of encounter, 14 minutes, 21 seconds. Level of intimacy, high. Key phrases, don't worry about David. He'll never know. Sarah's getting suspicious. Sarah, his wife. Another variable in the equation. When they finally left, disappearing out the front door as quickly as they'd appeared, I didn't smash the monitor. I didn't scream. My hand was perfectly steady as I moved the mouse. I trimmed the clip, from the moment she entered the frame to the moment he left. I downloaded the file, the original uncompressed 4K video. I opened a terminal window and entered a few lines of code, creating a new, hidden, encrypted partition on my hard drive. A digital black site. I moved the video file into it. Evidence, Klarich Exhibit A, MKV. Then I closed the window and leaned back in my chair. The house was silent again, except for the gentle hum of the server in the closet. My system, my fortress. It hadn't failed. It had worked perfectly. It had shown me the truth in undeniable high-resolution detail. The user had been compromised. A back door had been opened, and a Trojan horse had walked right in. And I, the system administrator, knew exactly what you do with a compromised system. You don't just patch it. You isolate the threat, analyze its behavior, and then you burn it to the ground. You format the drive and start over. Chapter 3, The Architect of Ruins. Emily came home an hour later, flushed and cheerful from her book club. She found me on the couch, Bailey curled at my feet. The TV was off. The house was quiet. "Hey, you," she said, her voice bright. She leaned down and kissed the top of my head. Her perfume, the same scent from the video, filled the air. My stomach didn't lurch. My heart rate didn't spike. I felt nothing. It was a data point, an olfactory identifier. That's all. "How was Austin?" she asked, kicking off her shoes and sinking onto the couch beside me. "Productive," I said, my voice even. "The usual, fixed their firewalls, ate too much brisket." "Poor baby." She patted my knee. "Did you and Bailey have a good night?" I looked her directly in the eyes. Her gaze was clear, open, affectionate, a perfect mask, a well-designed user interface hiding corrupt code. "We did," I said, forcing a small smile. "Just hung out. Missed you." The lie slipped out effortlessly. It felt natural. This was the new protocol, deception for deception, mirroring the system to gain its trust before executing the kill command. She bought it completely, smiling as she rested her head on my shoulder, just as she had so many times before. The only difference was that this time, every nerve in my body was screaming threat detected. I did not put my arm around her. It was a small change, a tiny deviation from the script, but I noticed it. I wondered if she did. She didn't seem to. She was asleep within the hour. I lay next to her in the dark, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of her breathing. The same breathing I'd found comforting for a decade. Now it was just the sound of a foreign presence in my bed. My mind, however, was wide awake. It was racing, running threat assessments, calculating variables, building models. The analyst was back at the helm. I slipped out of bed, careful not to make a sound. Bailey lifted his head from his dog bed in the corner, his tail giving a sleepy thump, thump, thump against the floor. I gave him a soft pat, a silent reassurance, and patted down the hall to my office. I closed the door, the soft click of the latch sounding like a vault sealing shut. This room was my real fortress, not the house, with its compromised locks and shared spaces. This was my inner sanctum. The server hummed quietly in its custom-built, sound-dampened rack. Banks of monitors sat dark and silent. It was here, in the digital ether, that I had dismantled empires. I didn't turn on my main workstation. It was networked. It was part of the house, part of their world now. Instead, I reached deep into the back of a closet, behind boxes of old tax records and obsolete hardware. I pulled out a black Pelican case, thick with dust. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, was a laptop, a Panasonic Toughbook, no wireless card, no Bluetooth, no microphone. An air-gapped machine, designed for one purpose: analysis in hostile environments. It had never once touched the internet. I placed it on my desk and powered it on. The operating system was a stripped-down, hardened version of Linux. No frills, just pure function. On the desktop, there was only one folder, cryptically named Archive. I opened it. Inside was my past, a collection of subfolders, each named with a stock ticker symbol, ENRN, WCOM, LEH. Inside each folder were the digital skeletons of fallen kings, flowcharts of offshore accounts, psychological profiles built from fragments of deleted emails, timelines of betrayal meticulously documented. These were my blueprints, the schematics for controlled demolitions. I created a new folder. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. What to call it? This wasn't a corporation. This was domestic, personal. I typed, Project, Neighbor. My objective began to crystallize, not out of rage, but out of a cold, clear logic. This wasn't about a broken heart. This was about a system breach. Steve wasn't just a man who slept with my wife. He was an unauthorized user who had gained administrative access to my life. He had assessed me, found me wanting, and exploited a vulnerability. He thought I was a non-player character in his story, the harmless, oblivious husband. He had made a critical miscalculation. He had no idea what I was. Revenge. The word felt cheap, inadequate. This wasn't about causing pain. It was about deconstruction. It was about taking the edifice of his life, his perfect family, his sterling reputation, his community leader status, and methodically, brick by brick, taking it apart until nothing was left but the rubble of the man he pretended to be. I wouldn't use my fists. I wouldn't even raise my voice. I would use the one thing I had mastered: information. His own life, his own choices would be the explosives. I would just be the demolition expert, placing the charges. And Emily, she was the vulnerability, the compromised security protocol that had let the virus in. For now, she was a variable to be managed. She was a source of intelligence. I would play the part of the loving husband. I would observe. I would gather data. Her judgment would come later. First, I had to neutralize the primary threat. I opened a new text file. The first line I typed was a quote from an old mentor, a man who had taught me how to hunt monsters in the digital world. Amateurs hack systems. Professionals hack people. I looked at the blank document, the cursor blinking patiently. The plan began to form, a complex flowchart of actions and reactions, of pressures and predicted failures. Steve had built his entire life on a foundation of carefully curated public perception. That foundation was about to be subjected to a stress test it was never designed to withstand. And I, the architect of ruins, was going to enjoy every second of the demolition. The next morning, the world looked exactly the same. The sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns. Sprinklers hissed in unison. It was trash day, and the uniform green and blue bins lined the curb like soldiers at attention. Order, predictability, a perfect illusion. I went through the motions. I made coffee. I let Bailey out. I kissed Emily goodbye as she left for work, the gesture feeling alien and disconnected, like I was an actor playing a role I hadn't properly rehearsed. "Have a good day," I said, the words tasting like ash. "You too," she chirped, oblivious. "Donut worked too hard." The moment her car was out of sight, I went to work. But not on the firewalls of my clients. I was working on Steve. My first move was to appear completely normal. I took my laptop out to the front porch, a strategic position with a clear view of Steve's house. I was ostensibly getting some fresh air, a plausible act for a guy who works from home. In reality, I was conducting surveillance. At 8:15 a.m., Steve's garage door rolled open. He emerged, already in his realtor uniform, a crisp polo shirt with his company as logo, pleated khakis, and a Bluetooth earpiece permanently affixed. He was followed by his wife, Sarah, and their 2 kids, a boy and a girl around 10 and 12. It was a scene straight out of a catalog for suburban living. He kissed his wife, high-fived his son, and tousled his daughter's hair. The perfect family man, performing for the neighborhood. He caught my eye across the street and gave me a hearty wave. "Morning, David," he called out, his voice radiating a confidence that bordered on arrogance. I gave a friendly, slightly nerdy wave back. "Morning, Steve. Have a good one." He was studying me. I could feel it. He was checking to see if the system was still functioning as expected. My placid, non-threatening response was the green light he was looking for. System normal. User is oblivious. He got into his oversized white SUV and drove away, the king leaving his castle. I went back inside and straight to my office. Phase 1 was OSINT, Open Source Intelligence. It's astonishing what people will tell you about themselves for free. I started with the obvious. Facebook. Steve's profile was a masterclass in personal branding. Every photo was meticulously curated. Here, Steve coaching his son as the Little League team, the Plano Predators, to victory. Here's Steve at a charity 5K, sweating gracefully. Here's Steve and Sarah on a date night, smiling over cocktails. His bio read, husband, father, coach, community builder. Helping families find their dream home in the DFW area. It was nauseatingly perfect. I scrolled back, years into his digital history. I wasn't looking for dirt. Not yet. I was looking for patterns, egotism, insecurities, the little cracks in the facade. He liked to post his sales achievements, just closed on this beauty. #1 realtor in Collin County. He tagged his brokerage in every post. He loved public validation. Weakness identified, ego, dependent on external approval. Then I moved on to Sarah's profile. Hers was different, less curated, more genuine. It was almost exclusively about her kids and her husband. So proud of my amazing husband Steve for winning the top producer award again. My heart is so full watching Steve coach these boys. He's such a wonderful role model. She was his chief promoter, the anchor of his public image. She was also his biggest vulnerability. Her belief in him was absolute. If that belief was shattered, the entire structure would become unstable. Potential leverage point: Sarah's unwavering trust. I spent the next 4 hours diving deeper. I scraped the county property records website, cross-referencing every property he delisted or sold in the past 5 years. I built a spreadsheet, noting commissions, days on market, client names. I used public databases to find articles about him in the local paper, mostly fluff pieces about the real estate market or the success of his Little League team. The picture that emerged was one of relentless image management. Steve wasn't just a realtor. He was playing the part of a successful realtor. He wasn't just a father. He was performing the role of the ideal father. His life was a stage, and he never broke character. People like that, the ones who live inside a carefully constructed identity, have a mortal fear of being exposed. Their strength, that perfect, polished image, is the very thing that makes them so fragile. All you have to do is find a loose thread and pull. The whole costume will unravel. By lunchtime, I had my initial target profile. Subject: Stephen Steve Peterson. Profession: residential real estate agent. Public identity: the all-American dad, community pillar. Core motivator: public admiration and the maintenance of a high-status image. Primary weaknesses: 1. Ego requires constant validation. A public slight or failure would be disproportionately damaging to his psyche. 2. Reputation. His entire business model is built on trust and his good guy persona. Damage to this is damage to his income. 3. Complacency. He underestimates others, particularly those he perceives as lower status, e.g., the nerdy IT guy next door. He doesn't expect an attack. 4. Sarah. His wife's belief in him is a cornerstone of his identity. If she doubts him, he will lose his emotional foundation. The profile was a start, but I needed more than just a psychological sketch. I needed tactical entry points. I needed to find the systems he controlled, his business, his team, his finances, and identify their vulnerabilities. I leaned back, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. The hunt had begun. Steve thought he was playing a simple game of suburban infidelity with my wife. He had no idea he'd just become the subject of a full-spectrum forensic analysis. He was the system, and I was the hacker who had just found a dozen ways in. For the next week, I lived a double life. Outwardly, I was David, the attentive husband. I cooked Emily her favorite dinners. I asked about her day, listening with feigned interest to stories about her clients and office politics. I even initiated intimacy, a cold, calculated act of misdirection designed to lull her suspicions. Each touch felt like a lie, a necessary piece of social engineering to keep the primary vulnerability in my own system pacified and compliant. She seemed to blossom under the renewed attention, becoming more relaxed, more open, and more careless. Inwardly, in the silent hours after she fell asleep or the long stretches of my workday, I was the analyst. I was a digital predator, stalking my prey through the tangled wires of the modern world. I had the psychological profile. Now I needed the levers, the specific, tangible points of pressure I could apply to begin the deconstruction. My search started with the Little League team, the Plano Predators. It was the heart of Steve's public persona, the source of his role model status. On the league's amateurish website, I found a page for the team with a roster of the kids' names and a "Thank you to our sponsors" section. Underneath a list of local businesses, a dentist, a car wash, an insurance agent, was a note. Team operations are managed by Coach Steve Peterson. For inquiries about the team fund, please contact him directly. Bingo, a fund, managed solely by him. No oversight mentioned. This was a classic vulnerability. Small-time community funds are notoriously sloppy. People trust the good guy coach, handing over cash or writing checks without demanding receipts or detailed budgets. It's a system built entirely on reputation. Steve's favorite currency. I needed to see inside that system. A direct request for records would be too suspicious. I had to be a ghost. I started by cross-referencing the player roster with my neighborhood directory and public social media profiles. It took a few hours, but I was able to identify the parents of nearly every kid on the team. I then created a new, anonymous email address, something generic and untraceable. Concerned, parent, plano.protonmail.com, from a public Wi-Fi hotspot at a Starbucks miles from my home. Using the Tor browser to mask my digital footprint, I sent a single, simple email. It wasn't to Steve. It was to the treasurer of the entire Little League, a woman named Brenda who, according to the website, was a CPA. The perfect target, someone professionally obligated to care about financial irregularities. The email was a masterpiece of subtlety. Subject: quick question about team fund guidelines. Hi Brenda, my son is new to the league this year, and we're thrilled to be a part of it. I had a quick question about the individual team funds. I wanted to make a larger, tax-deductible donation to my son's team, the Predators, but I wasn't sure of the proper procedure. Does the league require coaches to maintain a separate 501c3 account for the team, or are the funds managed more informally? Just want to make sure we're doing everything by the book. Thanks so much for your help, a concerned parent I didn't accuse. I didn't even mention Steve's name directly. I simply framed my inquiry as a responsible parent trying to follow the rules. But I knew what this email would do. It would activate Brenda, professional instincts. It would force her to scrutinize the Predators' informal arrangement. I wasn't reporting a crime. I was planting a seed of doubt in the mind of the one person with the authority to demand an audit. The system would do the work for me. My second lever was his real estate business. This was more difficult. Real estate transactions are public record, but the nuances, the client relationships, the negotiations are not. I needed an insider's view. I found it in the most unlikely of places, a local Facebook group called Plano Moms. Emily was a member. From her account, which I had full access to via the keylogger I'd installed on our home network years ago as a security measure, I searched for Steve L's name. There were dozens of posts, women recommending him, praising his professionalism. Steve Peterson is the best. He sold our house in one weekend for over asking. But I wasn't looking for praise. I was looking for dissent. I scrolled back, month after month, until I found it. A post from 8 months ago by a woman named Jessica. Has anyone had a tricky experience with a dual agent? Our agent represented both us, the buyers, and the sellers. And while he was super charming, we can't shake the feeling we overpaid. Is this normal? The post had a few vague, supportive comments, but one name jumped out at me in the replies. It was a local real estate attorney I recognized. He had written, Jessica, dual agency is legal in Texas, but it's full of potential conflicts of interest. The agent has a duty to both parties, which is almost impossible to fulfill fairly. Feel free to PM me if you want to chat. I looked up the property records for Jessica's home. The selling agent, Steve Peterson. This was a more potent louver. Allegations of financial mismanagement of a kid's baseball team were bad. Allegations of professional misconduct that cost a family thousands of dollars were career-threatening. I saved screenshots of the entire exchange. I didn't need to act on it yet. I was just collecting my explosives. The final lever I found was personal. It was the bracelet. The one Emily was wearing in the video. The one she said was a work bonus. It was a delicate gold chain with a small, distinctive charm, a designer piece. I did a reverse image search on a screen grab from the video. It was a Tiffany piece. Cost $1,200. A PR firm in Dallas doesn't give out Tiffany bracelets as a bonus for landing a new client. But a man having an affair might. Late that night, while Emily slept, I went into her closet. I found her jewelry box, and there it was. I took a high-resolution photo of it, and another of the small blue box it was nestled in. I put it back exactly as I found it. I now had my 3 levers of influence. 1. Financial, the questionable team fund, a blow to his public trust. 2. Professional, the dual agency complaint, a blow to his career. 3. Personal, the expensive gift, a potential link between him and my wife, and evidence of his own financial infidelity against his family. I sat in the dark of my office, the glow of the monitors casting my face in a cold, blue light. I had the target profile. I had the vulnerabilities. I had the levers. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was an operator with a mission, and I was ready to begin applying pressure. The first move in a demolition isn't the explosion. It's the subtle, almost imperceptible weakening of the structure's key supports. You don't start with a sledgehammer. You start with a drill, making tiny, precise holes where the stress will be greatest. My campaign against Steve began not with a bang, but with a series of quiet, anonymous keystrokes. My concerned parent email to Brenda, the league treasurer, was the first drill hole. I knew I couldn't push it. I had to let the seed I'd planted germinate on its own. The system had to believe the inquiry was organic. 2 days later, at the weekly team practice, I saw the first sign of growth. I was in the bleachers, playing the part of the supportive neighbor, watching my wife's lover coach a group of 10-year-olds. I kept my distance, offering a polite nod to the other parents. Steve was in his element, shouting encouragement, demonstrating the perfect batting stance. He was radiating confidence. Then Brenda's minivan pulled into the parking lot. She wasn't a predator's parent. Her presence was an anomaly. She walked over to the dugout, a clipboard in her hand, and intercepted Steve between drills. I was too far away to hear, but I didn't need to. I am an expert in reading body language. Steve's initial reaction was a broad, welcoming smile. Classic charm offensive. Brenda's posture was stiff, professional. She spoke, and his smile tightened. He gestured expansively, then shrugged, as if dismissing a minor concern. She didn't mirror his relaxed posture. She tapped her pen on her clipboard, a clear sign of insistence. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. When she walked away, Steve's smile was gone. He barked an order at the kids on the field with an uncharacteristic sharpness that made a few of them flinch. He spent the rest of the practice looking distracted, his brow furrowed. The first hairline crack had appeared in the facade. The next drill hole targeted his professional life. I returned to the Plano Moms Facebook group, again through Emily's account. I didn't engage with Jessica's old post directly. That would leave a digital trail. Instead, I created another anonymous persona, a new Facebook profile for a fictional woman named Laura Miller. I used an AI-generated profile picture of a pleasant-looking suburban mom. I spent a day populating the profile with plausible details, interests in gardening, posts from a local church, a few shared recipes. I joined the Plano Moms group and waited to be approved. Once in, I didn't go after Steve. I went after the concept. I started a new thread, subject, advice needed. Real estate agent red flags. Hi everyone. My family and I are looking to buy our first home here in Plazo, and we're a bit overwhelmed. We met with an agent who was super nice, but he mentioned he could represent both us and the seller in something called dual agency. He said it would make things smoother, but it feels a little weird to me. Has anyone done this? What are the red flags we should watch out for? TIA. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of moms chimed in. No, run away. Huge conflict of interest. Our agent told us to never, ever do that. The post blew up. Jessica, the original poster from months ago, even commented, Laura, PM me. I have a story for you. I hadn't mentioned Steve's name once, but I had just carpet-bombed his primary hunting ground with a massive warning flare about one of his favorite, most profitable practices. I had poisoned the well. Any potential client in that group, a huge demographic for a suburban realtor, would now see him through a lens of suspicion. I was weaponizing community gossip, turning the very network he used to build his reputation against him. The quietest sabotage, however, was the one I conducted in my own home. I was turning my marriage into a psychological pressure cooker for Emily. I knew she was still seeing him. Subtle changes in her schedule, quick, hushed phone calls she thought I couldn't hear. I didn't confront her. Instead, I escalated my perfect husband routine. I bought her flowers for no reason. I left a sticky note on the bathroom mirror that said, "You're beautiful." I planned a weekend trip to the hill country, talking excitedly about the future, about the life we were building. Every loving gesture was a carefully calibrated turn of the screw. I was blanketing her with the evidence of the life she was betraying. Her guilt became a palpable presence in the house. She grew jumpy, her smiles strained. She started making mistakes. She'd forget things I'd told her, her mind clearly elsewhere. One evening, we were sitting on the back patio. Bailey was chewing on a toy at our feet. It was a perfect Texas evening, the sky turning a bruised purple. I saw Steve across the lawn, angrily yanking weeds from his flower bed. He looked tense. Brenda's little chat was clearly weighing on him. I chose my moment. "You know," I said casually, nodding toward his house, "Steve seems really stressed lately." Emily stiffened. I felt the change in her posture beside me. "Oh," she said, her voice a little too high. I hadn't noticed. "Yeah," I continued, my eyes on Steve's back. "He seems on edge. Snapped at his kid at practice the other day. Hope everything's okay with him. He's such a good guy, you know. A real pillar of the community." I took a sip of my beer, then looked directly at her. My expression was one of mild, friendly concern. I'd hate for him to lose that. A man's reputation is everything in a town like this. I watched the color drain from her face. I had just linked his stress, the stress I was causing, to his reputation. The very thing he and Emily were risking. I had shown her that I was watching, that I was seeing the cracks, all without ever revealing that I knew the cause. She was trapped. If she defended him, she'd seem too invested. If she agreed with me, she'd be condemning him. She did neither. She just looked down at her hands and said, "Yeah, it is." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a structural support groaning under a load it was never meant to bear. The sabotage was working. The tiny, invisible fractures were spreading through their secret world, and they still had no idea who was holding the drill. The next phase of the operation required a shift in strategy. External pressures were working, destabilizing Steve's public life. Now, I needed to cultivate an internal asset, a source of real-time intelligence from inside the enemy camp. That asset, ironically, was my wife. My goal was not just to observe her guilt, but to weaponize it. I began my psychological campaign at the breakfast table. Over coffee and toast, I became the concerned, loving husband, worried about the state of our marriage. I didn't accuse. I blamed myself. I began one morning, my voice infused with a carefully rehearsed vulnerability. I feel like I've been distant lately, buried in my work. I haven't been the husband you deserve. She looked up from her phone, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and suspicion. What? No, David, you've been great. No, I haven't, I insisted, reaching across the table to take her hand. Her skin was cool. I've been taking you for granted, taking this for granted. I squeezed her hand. I want to fix that. I want to be better. For us. This was a classic maneuver, the preemptive apology. By taking the blame for a non-existent fault, I was framing our entire relationship dynamic. I was the good husband trying to improve. Any problems, therefore, must have another source. It was a psychological pincer move. Her guilt over the affair would now be compounded by her guilt for betraying the husband who was trying so hard. I saw the conflict play out on her face, a flicker of relief he doesn't know, followed by a wave of shame. "You're a good husband, David," she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion I knew was genuine. She was breaking. From that point on, our home became my interrogation room. I never raised my voice. I never asked a direct question about Steve. I simply created an environment of such suffocating affection and earnestness that her lies became heavier and heavier to carry. I'd casually bring up news I'd read about data security. "It's amazing what people leave on their phones," I'd say, watching her reaction as her hand instinctively moved closer to her own device. "Deleted texts, location history. It's never really gone, you know. It's all just data." I started leaving my own phone, unlocked, on the kitchen counter. An offering of manufactured trust. I was inviting her to snoop, knowing she'd find nothing but boring work emails and articles about home networking. I was performing transparency to highlight her own secrecy. The turning point came on a Tuesday night. I knew from a brief, coded text I'd intercepted between her and Steve that their usual rendezvous had been canceled. Steve was swamped with paperwork for the league. My email to Brenda was paying dividends. I found Emily in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. She had a glass of wine in her hand, her shoulders slumped. She looked miserable. The strain was becoming unbearable for her. I sat down next to her, not too close, giving her space. Tough day? I asked softly. She just nodded, her eyes glistening. Anything I can do. She shook her head. Then, after a long silence, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Do you think a person can be two things at once? The hook was set. What do you mean? I asked, feigning innocent confusion. Like, a good person who does a bad thing. Does the bad thing cancel out all the good? My internal analyst was screaming with triumph, but my face showed only gentle concern. I think, I said, choosing my words with surgical precision, that depends on the thing, and on whether they stop doing it. A mistake is one thing, a pattern is another. A pattern becomes a choice. It becomes who you are. I let the words hang in the air. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, applying my statement to her own situation. What about for other people? She pressed, her voice fragile. Like, what if you found out someone you thought was a great guy, a role model even, was secretly doing something unethical? She was talking about Steve. She was testing the waters, trying to gauge my reaction to a hypothetical that was her reality. She was looking for absolution, for a way to reconcile the perfect family man she was sleeping with and the stressed, cornered man he was becoming. I guess I'd feel sorry for the people who believed in him, I said, my voice cold and clear, all trace of warmth gone. Because a guy like that, he's not just lying to himself, he's a fraud, and frauds eventually get exposed. It's inevitable. The system always corrects itself. I stood up. I'm heading to bed. I left her there on the couch, alone with my words and her wine. I had done it. I had turned her from his co-conspirator into my unwilling informant. She hadn't given me names or dates, but she had given me something far more valuable, confirmation. Confirmation that the pressure was working. Confirmation that Steve's carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble from the inside out. And confirmation that my wife, the enemy within my own fortress, was starting to understand the true nature of the man she had chosen over me. She was beginning to see him not as a romantic hero, but as a liability, a fraud. And she was terrified. The pressure I'd applied wasn't a single massive blow. It was a series of sustained, oscillating frequencies, each one tuned to a different structural weakness in Steve's life. And now, the resonance was beginning to cause a catastrophic failure. The chain reaction had begun. The first visible explosion happened at the ballpark. It was a Saturday morning game. The Predators were playing their biggest rivals. The stands were packed with parents. I was there, of course, sitting alone in the top row of the bleachers, an unassuming observer in a baseball cap and sunglasses. The game was tense, and the Predators were losing. Steve, who was normally a calm and encouraging coach, was a live wire. He yelled at the umpire over a close call. He berated a 10-year-old for missing a fly ball. The other parents were exchanging uncomfortable glances. This wasn't the coach Steve they knew. The breaking point came in the bottom of the 6th inning. Steve's own son was at bat, bases loaded, 2 outs. The team was down by 1 run. It was the storybook moment he lived for. The boy swung and missed for strike 3. The game was over. Steve didn't console his son. He threw his clipboard on the ground, the plastic shattering. "What was that?" He roared, his voice echoing across the silent field. "I've told you 1,000 times. Keep your eye on the ball." His son stood frozen at home plate. tears welling in his eyes. Sarah, his wife, rushed down from the stands. "Steve!" she cried, her voice a sharp crack of disbelief. "He's a child." The public humiliation was absolute. Steve stood there, his face red, his perfect dad mask completely gone, replaced by the snarling face of a man under immense pressure. He had just committed the one sin his public persona couldn't tolerate. He had been a bad father, in front of everyone. I watched, a cold, detached observer. I knew the source of his rage wasn't a missed pitch. It was the packet he'd received from the league office 2 days earlier, formally requesting a full accounting of the team fund for the last 3 years. It was the call he'd gotten from his brokerage's compliance department after my anonymous Laura Miller persona had forwarded Jessica's story, stripped of names but full of damning detail, to their general ethics hotline. His pillars of support were cracking, and the pressure was making him volatile. He was making mistakes. The fallout was immediate. On the Plano Moms Facebook group that night, the tone shifted from gossip to genuine concern. Did anyone else see Coach Steve's meltdown today? It was really upsetting. The thread was 100 comments long by midnight. His social capital was hemorrhaging. Emily saw it all. She came to me that evening, her face pale. "You were right," she said, avoiding my eyes. "About Steve. Something's wrong with him." "People reveal who they really are when they're under pressure," I said calmly, not looking up from the book I was reading. I was giving her no emotional satisfaction, no "I told you so." Just the cold, hard logic of a system correcting itself. The chain reaction was now self-sustaining. Steve, desperate to shore up his crumbling reputation, focused on his work. He needed a big win, a high-profile sale to prove he was still on top, and in his desperation, he got sloppy. He took on a new client, a wealthy couple moving from California. He found them a house, and, in a move of pure hubris, he convinced the sellers to let him represent them as well. Another dual agency deal. He was chasing the double commission, trying to solve his problems with a single influx of cash. He didn't know that I was watching. I had set up a Google alert for his name and his brokerage. The new listing popped into my inbox the day it went live. Using publicly available data, I pulled the inspection history on the property. And I found it. A report from 2 years prior detailing evidence of foundation issues, a common and costly problem in the shifting clay soil of North Texas. The issue had been patched, but not properly repaired. Under Texas law, this was a material defect that absolutely had to be disclosed to any potential buyer. Steve, in his haste, either didn't do his due diligence or, more likely, chose to ignore it. I now had the kill shot. This wasn't a vague ethical complaint on a mommy blog. This was evidence of potential real estate fraud. I waited. I let the deal proceed. I watched the sold sign go up on the lawn. I let Steve collect his commission. I let him have his momentary victory, his brief sigh of relief. Then, I assembled the package. I created a new anonymous email, this time for a fictional, concerned neighbor. I wrote a short, simple message to the new buyers, whose names were now on the public property records. Subject: hope you love the new house. Just a heads up, hi there. Welcome to the neighborhood. We're so glad to have you. I'm one of your new neighbors, and I just wanted to give you a quick, friendly heads up about something you might want to look into. The previous owners had some foundation issues a couple of years back. I'm sure your agent disclosed all of this, but I just wanted to make sure you saw the engineering report from 2021. It's public record if you know where to look. It'd be a shame for you to get any surprises down the line. All the best, a neighbor. I attached the full, unredacted engineering report. I hit send. The fuse was lit on a bomb that would not just destroy his career, but would mire him in lawsuits and financial ruin for years to come. He thought he was putting out fires. He had no idea I was standing just out of sight, pouring gasoline on the embers. The chain reaction was about to reach its final, spectacular conclusion. The final game of the season arrived on a sweltering Saturday afternoon. It was the championship. The Plano Predators, against all odds, were in it. Steve had managed to pull the team together, his on-field persona restored to a desperate, brittle version of its former glory. For him, this wasn't just a game. It was a lifeline. A victory here, a shiny trophy, a night of celebration. It was his last chance to salvage his public image, to paper over the cracks that had spiderwebbed through his life. They won. A walk-off single in the bottom of the last inning. The kids erupted in a joyous pile-on. The parents cheered. For a fleeting moment, Steve was a hero again. He lifted the championship trophy over his head, a wide, triumphant, and utterly hollow smile plastered on his face. He was king for a day. The culmination of his fleeting victory was to be the team's end-of-season banquet, held that evening in a private room at a local family restaurant. It was Steve's masterpiece of community theater. There would be pizza for the kids, speeches from the coaches, and awards for every player. It was the apotheosis of the Steve Peterson brand: community, family, and success. It was the perfect stage for his final act. I had no intention of attending. My work was to be done from the quiet of my office. At 6:00 p.m., an hour before the banquet was set to begin, I initiated the final sequence. I had 2 packages, prepared with the sterile precision of a bomb maker. They were not identical. Each was tailored to its specific target. The first was for Sarah. I had her email address from the team roster. I used a secure, anonymous email service, one that would strip all metadata and make the message untraceable. The subject line was simple, devastating: the Tiffany bracelet and the team fund. The body of the email was brief: Sarah, you are a good person who has been lied to. You deserve the truth. Ask your husband what he bought at the Tiffany & Co. at North Park Center on the afternoon of Tuesday, September 12th. Transaction 78B42. Total $1,267. $50, and then ask him why that amount, along with many other personal expenses, was paid for using a debit card linked to the Plano Predators team fund. The attached documents are the bank statements for the team fund for the last 6 months, obtained via a concerned league official. I have highlighted the relevant transactions. He is not the man you think he is. The attachment was a PDF. The first page was a high-resolution photo of the Tiffany bracelet I had taken from Emily's jewelry box. The following pages were the bank statements, each personal expense, lunches, gas, a spa gift certificate, and the Tiffany purchase, circled in red. It was undeniable. I wasn't telling her about the affair. I was giving her the irrefutable evidence of his financial betrayal, using her children's team fund, and letting her connect the dots herself. The bracelet would be the key. The second package was for the president of the Little League, a man named George Dunlop, a well-respected local business owner. His email was public knowledge. The subject line, Urgent and confidential financial misconduct. Plano predators. The email to George was more formal, more damning. It included the same bank statements, but it also included a detailed spreadsheet I had created, cross-referencing every questionable expense with Steve's known activities. More importantly, it included copies of the formal complaint filed by the new homeowners for felony real estate fraud, which their lawyer had submitted to the Texas Real Estate Commission that very morning. I had obtained a copy through a contact from my old life. I laid out the case against Steve Peterson not as a betrayed husband, but as a concerned citizen. The message was clear. This was not just a case of sloppy bookkeeping. This was a pattern of deceit that spanned every aspect of his life. He was a predator, using the team as his personal slush fund and his reputation as a shield. I ended the email with a simple sentence. I trust the league will take the appropriate action to protect the children and the families who put their faith in your organization. I hit send on both emails at 6:05 p.m. Then I shut down my laptop and went to make myself a sandwich. The charges were set. The timers were running. The demolition was now in the hands of the system itself. I can picture the scene at the restaurant. The sounds of kids laughing, the smell of pizza. Steve at the podium, trophy gleaming beside him, beginning his speech. He'd be thanking the parents, praising the players, rebuilding his world one platitude at a time. And then, somewhere in the room, a phone would buzz. It would be Sarah. She'd glance at the screen, see the subject line. Her brow would furrow. She'd open the email. The world would stop. I can see her face, the slow-motion cascade of emotions, confusion, then disbelief, then a sickening, dawning horror as she sees the picture of the bracelet. A bracelet she's never seen. Not on her, anyway. Then her eyes would scan the bank statements, the red circles blurring through her tears. The spa day he won in a raffle. The fancy lunches he claimed were with clients, all paid for with money meant for her son's team. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't make a scene. A woman like Sarah, her entire life built around maintaining a certain image, would know how to suffer in silence. She would just stand up, her face a pale, emotionless mask, and walk out of the room, leaving her husband standing alone at the podium, his triumphant speech turning to ash in his mouth. Another phone would buzz. George Dunlop's. He'd read my email, his face growing grimmer with every line. He would see not just a coach who bent the rules, but a con man who posed a massive liability to his entire organization. The whispers would start. The banquet, Steve's moment of redemption, would curdle into a wake. The parents would see Sarah leave. They'd see George Dunlop walk over to Steve at the podium, his face like stone, and speak to him in a low, urgent voice. The celebration would die. Steve Peterson's world didn't end in a fiery explosion. It ended in a cheap, half-empty restaurant banquet hall, under the buzzing fluorescent lights, to the sound of hushed whispers and the sight of his wife walking out of his life forever. It was a perfectly controlled demolition, and I didn't have to be anywhere near the blast zone. I didn't need to be at the banquet to see the aftermath. I saw it in the headlights that swept across my living room wall at 8:17 p.m., far too early for the celebration to have ended. I watched through my own security camera feed as Emily's car pulled into the driveway. She didn't get out immediately. She just sat there for a full 5 minutes, a dark silhouette in the driver's seat. When she finally came inside, The air in the house changed. The silence, which had been peaceful, became heavy and fraught. She walked into the kitchen where I was sitting, reading a book, Bailey asleep at my feet. She didn't look at me. She dropped her keys on the counter with a clatter that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "It's over," she said. Her voice was flat, hollowed out. I didn't feign ignorance. The time for games, for subtle psychological pressure, was done. I bookmarked my page and closed the book, setting it aside with deliberate calm. "Tell me," I said. My voice was even, betraying no emotion. It was the voice of a man requesting a final project report. "Sarah got an email," she began, her words tumbling out in a rush. "At the banquet." She just stood up and walked out. Steve went after her. They were screaming at each other in the parking lot. Everyone heard. George Dunlop pulled him aside. They took the trophy back. They're removing him as coach. Someone said something about the police, about fraud. She was rambling, piecing together the shrapnel of the explosion. She finally looked at me then, her eyes searching my face for some reaction. Shock, anger, pity. She found none. She found only a calm, placid surface. "His life is ruined," she whispered, as if the realization was just now hitting her. "Everything. It's all gone. In an hour." "A structure with a compromised foundation doesn't collapse in an hour," I said, my voice as cold and hard as polished granite. "It just takes an hour for everyone to finally see the cracks. The collapse was inevitable. It began a long time ago." Her face crumpled. "David." I held up a hand, stopping her. "No." I stood up and walked over to the kitchen island. I picked up the tablet that we used for recipes and calendars. I swiped it on and tapped a single icon on the screen. Then I slid it across the smooth quartz countertop toward her. It stopped directly in front of her. On the screen, the video was already playing. Evidence Akshas Exhibit A, MKV, the living room, bathed in afternoon sunlight. The sound of the front door. Her smile. His kiss. I had set it to loop. She stared at the screen, her own betrayal playing out in silent, high-definition clarity. The color drained from her face, leaving a sickly, grayish pallor. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She was watching the ghost of a life that no longer existed. "This is the system I built," I said, my voice low and steady. I pointed to the tablet. "And this is the virus you invited inside." I let the weight of that statement settle in the room. I let her watch herself, watch him. I let her see the casualness of their betrayal, the arrogance in his voice as he said, "Don't worry about David." "I have spent the last 3 weeks," I continued, "doing what I do best. I conducted a systemic purge. I isolated the threat. I analyzed its weaknesses. And I deployed a series of countermeasures designed to trigger a cascading failure. The virus has been eradicated." Her eyes lifted from the screen, wide with a terrifying, dawning comprehension. It wasn't just that I knew, it was the way I knew. The methodical, passionless way I was describing the complete and utter destruction of another human being. She wasn't looking at her husband, the quiet IT geek. She was looking at a stranger, a man she had lived with for a decade and never truly known at all. You did this," she breathed, the words catching in her throat. "The emails, the mom's group, all of it." "All of it," I confirmed. There was no pride in my voice, no anger, just a statement of fact. He made the mistake of thinking my home was an undefended network. He didn't realize he was trying to hack a black site. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the counter. "Now," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, "we have to format the drive." I laid out the terms. Not with rage or with tears, but with the dispassionate clarity of a corporate restructuring plan. The house would be sold. Our assets would be divided exactly according to the law. Not a penny more, not a penny less. She would be out of the house by the end of the month. The divorce would be uncontested. There would be no arguments, no negotiations. "This isn't a discussion, Emily," I said, my voice leaving no room for debate. "This is a systems report. The partnership has been terminated due to a catastrophic security breach. These are the protocols for dissolution." She finally broke. A gut-wrenching sob escaped her lips. "David, please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I love you." I looked at her, and for the first time I felt a flicker of something. Not love, not hate, just a profound and weary sadness. "No, you don't," I said, and the truth of it was absolute. "You loved the idea of me, the safety, the stability. You loved the system I provided, but you found it boring. You wanted the thrill of a security risk. Well, you got it. This is the consequence. The system protecting itself." I picked up the tablet and turned off the looping video. The screen went dark. "It's over," I said, echoing her own words back at her. "Now you just need to pack." 6 months have passed. The house is quiet now. Cleaner. More orderly. The for sale sign on my lawn went up last week, right next to the one that's been on Steve's lawn for months. I see him sometimes when I take Bailey for a walk. He's aged a decade. The confident swagger is gone, replaced by a defeated slump. He's lost his job, his family, his place in the world. He's a ghost haunting the ruins of his own life. He never looks my way. I don't think he ever figured it out. To him, it was all just a string of terrible luck. He's incapable of seeing the architecture behind his own collapse. Emily is gone. She moved into an apartment across town. We communicate only through our lawyers. I hear she is trying to rebuild her life, but it's hard. The story of what happened, the public implosion of the perfect family man, became a piece of local lore. Her association with him has made her a pariah. She was collateral damage in a war she helped start. I don't feel triumph. I don't feel vindicated. I feel quiet. The analyst in me is satisfied. A compromised system was identified, neutralized, and decommissioned. Order was restored. But the man, the husband, knows what was lost. The warmth is gone from the house. The scent of her perfume no longer lingers in the halls. There are no more happy memories being uploaded to the server. I sit in my office, the monitors glowing in the dark. On one screen is the live feed from the camera in the living room. It's empty, pristine, and secure. My fortress is finally impenetrable. But I know now that the greatest threats don't come from the outside. They don't pick locks or break windows. They smile at you over breakfast. They use the key you gave them. They open the door and let the monster in, all while telling you they love you. Any system can be secured, but no system can withstand a betrayal from within. Lesson learned. Protocols updated.